I was wiping powdered creamer off the counter when I heard it. Voice like a kid straight out of college, loud enough to carry over the cheap break room radio playing 80s rock. They offered me 92, he said. I froze. 92. As in 1,000. As in 20 more than me. He fumbled with his phone, trying to figure out how to log into his damn company email while I stood there, 17 years deep into this place, suddenly feeling like I was floating outside my own body. 17 years through mergers, buyouts, bankrupt leadership, and 2 failed product launches. I had written the training manual this boy was supposed to read. I had trained his manager. I had single-handedly saved this company's skin when their lead developer walked out mid-deployment. And here he was, asking how to find the restroom, and making more than me. I didn't even say anything. I didn't have to. The rage had this quiet, almost clinical edge, like that moment after a car crash where everything slows down and you just know. When I walked over to HR, I was calm, too calm. I asked them if the new hire salaries had changed recently. The HR girl didn't blink. That's the going rate, she said, with a shrug that felt like a slap in the mouth. Then her eyes flicked back to her monitor and she added, "You can accept it, or leave." Now, before I go any further, do me one favor. If you've ever been told to just accept it, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and you'd be surprised how many people watch these without subscribing. Don't be one of them. All right, let's keep going. I didn't cry, didn't yell. I just left the building like a ghost. Quiet, invisible, and already fading from their memory like I was some old operating manual they'd finally decided to toss in a shred bin. I sat in my car, engine running, and stared at the glass facade of the building I'd basically raised from the dirt. The same windows I'd seen my reflection in every morning for almost 2 decades. And for the first time ever, I looked like a stranger, like someone who didn't belong. Because apparently, I didn't. 17 years. I was here before the carpet was. I was here when the servers caught fire and we worked off whiteboards and coffee-fueled adrenaline for 3 weeks straight. I was here when they couldn't make payroll and I postponed my mortgage to keep our contracts going. I was here when the CEO was a guy in a hoodie and not some tie-wearing mannequin with a TED Talk addiction. And now they had the nerve to offer some Gen Z intern with a TikTok addiction more than me, then tell me to accept it or leave. So I left. Not loudly, not with some grand speech or HR complaint or poorly written LinkedIn rant, just silence. But the thing about silence, it gives you space to plan. And I started planning. Because what they didn't realize was that every system they ran still had my fingerprints on it. Every dashboard, every workflow, every damn template. I didn't just do my job, I built my job. I designed the infrastructure they were too lazy to update, too cheap to replace, and too arrogant to appreciate. So when they decided I was replaceable, I smiled. Just once. Quietly. Because I knew something they didn't. They hadn't just underpaid me, they'd underpriced their entire future. 6 months earlier, this place was a flaming dumpster with a Wi-Fi signal, and I was the only one left holding the fire extinguisher. We had just botched the biggest rollout of the year. Our new platform launched without API stability, half the dashboards were throwing 500 errors, and client calls were coming in like a damn tsunami. One of our oldest accounts threatened litigation. Another froze payments. Legal was breathing down everyone's neck, and our CTO, who loves to disappear in a crisis, was suddenly traveling for a strategy summit. I stayed up for 2 straight nights. No sleep. Just Red Bull, cold coffee, and a hoodie that still smelled like stress from the 2019 Q3 disaster. I wrote a patch in 48 hours flat. Backed it with a buffer system that rerouted failing endpoints and masked load times so the clients wouldn't see the chaos bubbling underneath. That little ghost of a fix saved us $2.4 million in SLA penalties. Legal used the documentation I wrote to renegotiate half our contracts, slapped a big system resilience clause on the new model and called it innovation. My name, not mentioned, not once. The back end, I was the only one who had ever mapped the full logic tree. The only person who knew which modules still relied on legacy syntax and which had hard-coded dependencies buried deep under 4 rebrands and 5 CTOs. I didn't just understand the system, I was the system. And I kept my mouth shut. I always had. Because back then, I still believed that loyalty meant something. That if you worked hard, kept things running, kept things quiet, someone would eventually notice. Someone would say, hey, maybe we should promote the woman who just duct taped our infrastructure back together with 3 lines of Python and a paperclip. Instead, I watched as the bonus list rolled out the next quarter. Some kid with 6 months on the job got a 12K performance bump. Meanwhile, my boss walked into my office, handed me a peppermint from the HR bowl, and said, "You've hit your loyalty cap. We're reallocating raises to attract fresh talent." Loyalty cap. Like my commitment had a damn expiration date. Like 17 years of saving their asses had gone stale. I remember laughing. Not out loud, just that weird internal laugh where your soul packs a suitcase and starts browsing job boards before your body even moves. They needed me. Desperately. But they never wanted to admit it. That's the thing about being the quiet one who always fixes everything. You become wallpaper. Invisible. Expected. Until the paint starts peeling and suddenly everyone's asking why the room looks like hell. Well, I was about to stop fixing the room. Let them sit in their decay. Because if they didn't want to pay for loyalty, they were about to learn the real cost of losing it. I didn't stomp out of the office, didn't post a cryptic status or send an all-staff goodbye laced with passive aggression and vague Bible quotes. That's not my style. I'd seen other folks do it. Make a scene, cry in HR, threaten legal when they didn't even know what at will meant. It never changed anything. The machine kept grinding. The email chains kept pinging. Someone cleaned out their desk and their Slack account was deactivated before they hit the parking lot. Me? I went home like nothing happened. I made dinner, chopped vegetables like I hadn't just been told my worth was obsolete. My husband asked me if everything was all right, and I said, "Yeah, just tired." And maybe I was. Tired of fighting to be seen. Tired of pretending that showing up early and leaving late would ever be worth more than a buzzword on some kid's resume. I tucked my daughter in, closed her nightlight, and then, only then, I opened my personal laptop. I'd always been careful. Every system document I ever wrote before they made me sign that IP clause, I had backups. Clean, time-stamped, never touched the company network. It was my original work. Before the logo got slapped on, before they made me strip the headers and hand it off to someone who didn't even know what a dependency tree was. I exported it all again that night. Not the confidential stuff, just the bones, the blueprints, the soul of what I'd built. Then I went to GoDaddy and bought a domain. Clean, simple, 2 syllables. I registered the LLC under my husband's last name. Clean paper trail, no links to my current job. I filed the articles of incorporation, filled out the EIN form, and by midnight, I was technically the founder of a tech consultancy that didn't yet exist on paper, but was very real in my mind. I didn't make a vision board, didn't read a motivational quote about boss energy. I just opened Word, printed out 42 pages, my resignation letter, a copy of the IP clause with my annotations, a legal notice of what I retained prior to signature, and a simple list of client relationships I'd nurtured for over a decade. Just names, notes, and asterisks beside the ones who'd reached out to me directly after every fire I'd put out. I slid it all into a thick envelope. No return address, no flourish, just the facts. And the next morning, before the parking lot filled, and before the receptionist's fake lashes even blinked hello, I walked in early. Office was dead quiet. I left the envelope dead center on the CEO's leather chair, right under that framed photo of his boat he only takes out during IPO rumors. I didn't linger, didn't wait to see the reaction. I just turned, walked out, and drove to a coffee shop across town with a blank notepad and an open calendar. There were no fireworks, no dramatic exit music. But make no mistake, war had begun. I just preferred to win mine in silence. At 7:08 a.m., the man who once called me family for holding the company together during the 2020 meltdown strolled into his corner office, still holding his matcha latte like he was about to scroll through his morning affirmations and pretend everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Not today. The envelope was right there, centered on the seat of his 4,200 leather chair, the one he had custom dyed to match the trim of his Audi, not even sealed with anything fancy, just plain white, heavy with facts. You could see it in his face, how quickly the muscles in his jaw locked, how the latte trembled just slightly before he set it down. He didn't sit. He just opened the flap and started reading. First page, my resignation letter, 2 lines long. Second page, a legal notice documenting the systems and process guides I retained based on creation prior to IP assignment, signed and time-stamped. Page 3, the original work-for-hire agreement, annotated in red, with one sticky note that read, Sections 4.2a and 7.1c. See highlighted exemptions. Then the list. Not a threat, just a record, a decade of trust, names of clients I'd helped on board, contracts I'd salvaged, contacts who'd called me personally, not through support lines when things were falling apart. Not everyone was a high-value whale, but enough were. And enough knew me by name, not the companies. By 8:15, legal was in his office. I wasn't there, obviously, but the assistant I trained forwarded me the meeting request they accidentally left open on the shared calendar. Title: Urgent, Review IP and Client Dependencies. M. Winter's Departure. My name. First time it had been mentioned in a meeting title in 3 years. By 9:30, 2 of our biggest mid-market clients froze their accounts. Quietly, no explanation given, just a line in the CRM. Pending internal review, continuity. Translation? They were waiting to see if the person they actually trusted, the one who'd kept them afloat when rollout bugs threatened their entire supply chains, was still part of the picture. Spoiler, I wasn't. But here's what really stung them. I didn't slam the door. I didn't post online. I didn't badmouth them. That would have made it easier. Easier to discredit me. Easier to paint me as emotional, unstable, another burned-out tech girl who couldn't hang. No, I gave them silence. Deafening, clinical silence. The kind of absence that doesn't scream, it just echoes. Because they thought I'd beg, thought I'd rant, thought I'd try to prove my worth one last time. But instead, I left a paper trail and watched the machine start to choke on its own assumptions. By Friday afternoon, I was sitting in a high-rise downtown that smelled like leather and strategic leverage, the kind of place where the elevator floors gleamed so hard you could see your own exhaustion in the reflection. But I wasn't tired anymore. I was charged, coiled like a spring, and finally somewhere that didn't pretend I was invisible. Across the table sat Dennis Harwell, VP of Ops at one of our biggest legacy clients. We'd been on countless calls together over the years, me guiding him through our janky back-end workarounds while he vented about vendor delays and procurement bottlenecks. We'd traded sarcastic emails, Zoom side eyes, even one half-joking plan to set fire to our mutual project manager and blame it on a faulty Slack update. But this time, there was no middleman. He slid the folder across the table like it was a peace treaty between 2 nations sick of pretending diplomacy worked. If you're open to it, he said, we'd rather work with you directly. I opened it. Consulting offer. Not salary, not bonus-tiered carrots tied to impossible metrics, a full-fledged 12-month retainer that nearly doubled what I'd ever made in a year. Autonomy, no supervisor, no loyalty cap, just scope, expectations, and trust. For a minute, I just stared at the number. Not because I didn't believe I was worth it, but because it felt strange seeing someone else finally say it out loud. That after all these years of doing the work in silence, someone wasn't just acknowledging it, they were valuing it. I flipped to the last page, leaned back in the softest chair I'd sat in all week, and said, 1 clause. Dennis raised an eyebrow. I want the agreement voided if I ever go back to them. If I even consider rejoining, this dies on the spot. He grinned. That's the first clause we wrote. We both laughed, and I signed with a pen so smooth it felt like it belonged in a different tax bracket. He offered me a drink, something expensive I couldn't pronounce, and I declined. I had somewhere else to be, a life to return to, a daughter to pick up from school, a husband to surprise with a paycheck that finally matched the weight I'd been carrying. Walking out of that suite, past the glass offices filled with people who knew I was worth more, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not power, not revenge, just alignment. Like the world had finally caught up to what I'd been shouting with my work all along. And for once, it was willing to pay attention. Back at the company, things unraveled faster than an overused Ethernet cable in a server closet no one's cleaned since 2015. It started with a missed invoice batch. Then came the client who couldn't access their analytics dashboard. No matter how many times they refreshed, it just spun. Eventually, someone figured out that the cron jobs weren't syncing because the new guys didn't know the difference between a shell script and a post-it. The legacy systems, the backbone of our ops stack, were still running, but no one knew how, because no one had ever taken the time to learn them. They'd all been too busy pivoting to scalable cloud solutions or reimagining user engagement. Translation: playing buzzword bingo while I did the real work. The shortcut logins they were using, all mine. Personalized keys, access limited, with time-bound encryption. I hadn't changed a single password. I didn't have to. Most were scheduled to expire by end of quarter anyway, unless manually extended. by me. And the documentation? Oh, sweet irony. The PDFs in their onboarding packets? Authored by yours truly. But the internal versions had been stripped of metadata when legal cleaned them for IP consistency. Meaning, no one could tell where one module ended and the other began. And I wasn't around to explain the difference between legacy safe and legacy critical. So they guessed. And they guessed wrong. Support tickets tripled, then quadrupled. The junior devs tried to patch things without understanding the logic underneath, and in doing so, broke 5 other workflows that had been delicately balanced like dominoes on a Jenga tower. Clients began to notice, not loudly at first, but it started with one short email, subject line, "Quick check-in, is Marcus still with you?" Marcus was a mid-tier client, nothing flashy but consistent, loyal, and incredibly process-dependent. He always asked for me directly when things got weird. We had a shorthand. He once mailed me bourbon after I helped him recover 6 months of archived data with a single command line. Someone in client services replied to him, "Marcus, thanks for reaching out. Michelle is no longer with the company." And Marcus, in his usual no BS tone, responded 2 minutes later, "Then neither are we." No threats, no negotiations, just a customer who knew exactly where the value came from and wasn't about to gamble on amateurs learning by doing. That email triggered a review by 3 other clients. 2 of them paused payments. One demanded to speak to a systems engineer, only to be met with a fresh face who didn't know what a dependency chain was. I didn't make a scene. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't even revoke access. I just left. Took what was mine and let the silence do the rest. The real damage wasn't malicious. It was mathematical. When the equation suddenly lacks the one constant holding everything together, the outcome doesn't need to be forced. It just collapses on its own. I didn't announce anything. No dramatic career pivot posts. No vague humble brag captions with pictures of coffee and the skyline. I just opened LinkedIn, updated my headline, and closed the tab. That was it. No one from the old office liked it. Of course they didn't. Liking it would have meant acknowledging they noticed, and noticing would have meant admitting they'd made a mistake. But outside that bubble, the response came fast. Within 48 hours, my inbox looked like a Black Friday sale. 4 consulting offers. All direct, no recruiters, no middlemen, no quick 15-minute chats. Just people who remembered what it felt like to have me fix things that weren't supposed to be fixable. 2 of the firms I'd helped years ago, back when their infrastructures were bleeding out and their internal teams were too tangled in jargon to triage, reached out like clockwork. Same partners, same urgency, same grateful tone under the surface. But one message stood out. Simple, direct. From a CTO I barely remembered, but apparently hadn't forgotten me. Subject: platforms on fire. Body: heard you're free. We've got a platform in crisis. I stared at the screen for a moment, smiled, and typed back 3 words. Send the scope. No small talk, no posturing, just business. Clean, fast, and honest. The scope doc arrived within the hour, an 18-page PDF that reeked of desperation and half-finished dev work. I sent back my proposal by dinner time. They accepted it before I finished my glass of wine. The first payment hit my business account the next morning. Retainer plus performance bonus structure. It covered half a year of my old salary. For 1 month of work, 1 month. My husband saw the number, raised an eyebrow, and said, "That real?" "Apparently," I said, dry as sand. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about the correction, the way the market quietly, efficiently fixed what HR had undervalued for years. No meetings about it, no internal benchmarking, just direct compensation for direct impact. No one cared how long I'd been at my last job. They cared that I knew how to clean up messes, fast. I didn't chase opportunity. I didn't beg for validation. I just updated 1 line on my profile and let my reputation fill in the blanks. The quarterly all-hands meeting always started the same. Catered bagels, lukewarm enthusiasm, and the CEO pacing the stage with that rehearsed, self-satisfied grin he wore like a costume. He opened with his usual routine, thanking the team for resilience through uncertainty, then pivoting into buzzword soup. Synergy, agile expansion, Q3 optimism. I watched the live stream from home, cup of coffee in hand, like it was a rerun of a show I'd once starred in before they killed off my character without warning. But something shifted. About 10 minutes in, a woman from legal, one of the few sharp minds still left, stepped quietly onto the stage mid-presentation and handed him a red folder. She didn't say anything, just passed it off and stepped back like someone pulling a pin. He paused. The kind of pause you feel in your stomach before a plane drops. The grin stayed for half a second too long, then slipped. He flipped open the folder, and I knew the exact moment he saw it. His eyes stopped scanning. His mouth tightened at the edges. He adjusted his posture like he was suddenly aware of his own body, like the stage lights had gotten brighter, hotter. The folder contained 2 formal withdrawal letters. Not, "We're reducing spend," or "Let's revisit terms." No, these were termination notices, final, immediate. The reasoning was clear: loss of continuity and departure of key personnel. That language didn't come from procurement. That came from legal teams with teeth. He tried to recover, cleared his throat, stammered something about expected shifts and realigning partnerships. But the room had already changed. The faces staring back at him weren't buying it, especially the senior managers who had depended on those accounts for their quarterly metrics, the ones who knew exactly who had kept those contracts alive all these years. Then it happened. He glanced toward the back of the room. Reflex, almost. That back row had always been where I sat. Not because I was shy, but because that's where you get the best view of everything. I used to take notes no one else remembered. Whisper solutions during tech delays. Keep the train on the tracks from the shadows. Now that row was empty, and the absence of my presence hit harder than any speech could have. It was a void, a reminder. You can't replace someone who never needed a spotlight to hold the system together. And when they're gone, everyone notices the missing sound, especially the ones who took it for granted. It had been months since I'd left, and life had settled into a rhythm I didn't know I'd been craving. Mornings were quieter, my phone rang less, but when it did, it was clients asking clear questions with real budgets, not managers calling in a panic because someone forgot to reboot a test server. I was booked through next spring. I'd stopped thinking about them, mostly. Occasionally, I'd hear a whisper, another client jumping ship, another delay blamed on resourcing gaps, another headline about mid-sized firms losing senior talent and wondering where all the knowledge went. Then one Thursday afternoon, I got an email from a recruiter I'd worked with a few times before. Subject line, "Potential collaboration?" I opened it, skimmed, and there it was, his name, former CEO, now rebranded in corporate beige as a strategic consultant specializing in operational scaling and innovation culture. Attached was his resume, full of buzzwords and phrases like transformational leadership, ecosystem thinker, and, my personal favorite, expert in talent retention. The man who once looked me in the eye and said, "That's the going rate, accept it or leave," was now floating in the consultant pool, pitching his services to companies I advised, probably wondering why his inbox stayed so quiet. I didn't fume, didn't craft a petty response. I just typed one line into the reply window. That's the going rate for short-term thinking. Then I hit send, dragged the message into my archive folder, and closed the tab without another glance. No vindictive thrill, no sense of triumph, just a quiet acknowledgement of cause and effect. When you treat loyalty like a line item, you lose the people who built the foundation you're standing on. And when the walls start to crack, all the buzzwords in the world won't patch what walked out the door. He never responded, but I didn't expect him to. Men like that never do.